Shalom and Maranatha. Welcome to the Septuagint versus the Masoretic YouTube channel. Today we're looking at Deuteronomy chapter 28. It's a lengthy chapter, so let's just get right into it. 68 verses. Beginning in verse 2, significant difference here. It says here, find. Blessings shall find you versus overtake you. Next we have an addition in verse 4. Increase of your kine, which is cows, was added. Verse 5, significant difference in barns versus basket, which is a much larger quantity when you're talking about barns. Verse 7, Yah will deliver, or I should say Yah deliver your enemies that withstand you, utterly broken before your face, versus Yah shall cause your enemies that rise up against you to be smitten before your face. So let's see how that is different. Yah deliver your enemies. Okay, he's going to deliver them. Those who are resisting you or fighting you, they will be utterly broken before your face. So it's completely defeated. In the Masoretic, they're rising up against you. They are antagonistic, however, they're going to be smitten. So, yeah, it could imply being defeated, but not utterly defeated. This verse in verse 8, I'm saying I'm ignoring that, but I'm going to actually look into this because there seems to be a lot of information that I jot down here. It says, send upon you his blessing versus shall command the blessing upon you. The emphasis is the blessing. It is on what you put your hand in the land versus there are three separate blessings. One on your storehouses in the Masoretic and what you put your hand on, and also in the land, which is in verse 4 for both translations. It is mentioned actually. If we look back, you can see that it is mentioned in actually both. So that's an interesting observation. Verse 9, raise you up. Yah raise you up for himself versus establish you. Significant difference in the same verse. Swear to your fathers, which is Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, versus unto you. If you will hear the voice of Yah, your Elohim, versus if you shall keep the commandments of Yah. Verse 10, that the name of Yah is called upon you. It is associated with you, or perhaps being called on by you. And they shall stand in awe of you. Awesome wonder, their jaw is dropped. Verses, you are called by the name of Yah, meaning his name is on you, and they shall be afraid of you, or scared of you, have a fearful countenance. Verse 11, significant difference for good. It says here, for good. Where is that? Oh, multiply you for good purposes, versus in goods, which could mean merchandise. It says here, your land versus the land. Verse 12, significant difference, may versus shall. May versus shall. So these are all conditional in the Septuagint, depending on the big if in verse 14 that is coming up. And here's a big difference here. It is an omission of, and you shall rule over many nations, but they shall not rule over you. So that is significant. So they will not be ruled over, Israel, perhaps. However, doesn't it say in the prophecy, I'm just going to play devil's advocate here, doesn't it say that Esau or Edom will break the yoke off of his neck from Jacob, and then he's going to be able to overcome him? So I wonder how just how sturdy this is, this word. I'm not saying it isn't sturdy, but does the prophecy of Esau kind of contradict this verse? Verse 13 is an addition of shall, and there's an omission of then, in the Masoretic, then shalt. Significant difference: if you shall listen to the voice or hearken to the voice of Yah your Elohim in all things, versus if you hearken unto the commandments. Again, similar difference that we saw earlier in this chapter. 15, addition of his statutes. 20, big difference here. It says here, want and famine and consumption versus lack of resources, lack of food and water, being eaten and consumed away, physically destitute. So it says cursing, vexation, and rebuke. Okay, so we're talking about lack of resources, lack of food and water, being eaten and consumed away, which is physically destitute, versus cursing, vexation, and rebuke, which could mean cursed, troubled, corrected, which in my opinion is not that bad. It's not as bad as what is in the Septuagint, at least. So we have a mostly verbal, emotional, and conceptual consequence for disobedience. However, the Masoretic text, the word perish quickly, makes more sense in the modern vernacular, which is akin to an empire falling. So there are two different reasons: wicked devices and for forsaking Yah. So those are the reasons why these things will occur. Verse 22, big difference, is distress and cold and blighting. So distress is emotional / mental anguish. Blighting is to deteriorate or to be in the act of dying, or the process of dying. And paleness versus consumption, and with an extreme burning, and with the sword, and with blasting, such as a great force of air, or which is a great force of air. And with mildew, which is a superficial discoloration of plants in this context. Verse 24, the addition of powder. An omission as well as of and until it shall have quickly consumed you. 25, you shall be a dispersion in all the kingdoms of the earth, and you shall be removed into all kingdoms of the earth. So they are spared, but their lives are spared, but they are spread out across the world, or across different countries, versus they're possibly executed. There are no prisoners left, no survivors, or perhaps few survivors. Has this happened yet? I can't answer whether it did. It seems to have happened to some degree, but perhaps the future fulfillment is coming up. A greater captivity. Verse 26, scare versus fray. Verse 27, botch, which is a mess, which means mess. And the seat, which is the posterior, or the gluteus, versus hemorrhoids, which means hemorrhoids. There's an omission of malignant as it relates to the word scab. And all these will make it so that you cannot be healed, versus that you cannot be healed from. Okay, verse 28, mind versus heart. Verse 29, continual difference of a helper versus a man to save. Verse 30 can be seen in the moral depravity of our modern day. We look at the industrial age and corporate structures. This kind of behavior going on. Verse 32, an addition of all the day long. All the day long. Verse 33, a nation which you know not. So this is speculation. Is it perhaps China? Is it the EU? Is it United States? Is it the United Arab Emirates? Is it ancient Babylon perhaps? Is it ancient Persia or Assyria? And then ask the question, which nation is the largest importer of food? So it's hard to say dogmatically who this is. It's just a lot of speculation, but that's an interesting question. So whoever you think it is, please comment who you think that is and why. But a nation which you know not shall eat the produce of your land. Perhaps it will be the nation of the Antichrist, perhaps, or the nations that are allied with him. Injured versus oppressed in the same verse, and then a huge difference in verse 34. So let's look at this closely. And you shall be distracted. Notice that, and you shall be distracted. And yes, I agree this is 100% true, or I should say 1,000% true, especially since the turn of the 20th century. I have a lot of distractions in mass media, pop culture, and various technologies as you're using right now. There's a potential for it to be very distracting. So that you shall be mad, as it is expressed in the Masoretic. It says insane, upset, or angry, which could be different interpretations of what mad means. But it makes more sense in verse 34, and this, I believe, applies on a global scale. It's not just regional or only relevant to Israel. It's relevant to everybody, especially in this day and age. Verse 35, evil, sore versus sore botch. Verse 36, princes versus king. Yah is their true king. And he tells it like it is. Okay, because he isn't simply, they are ruled by princes. They are not ruled by your king, because if he were to say, if the Septuagint were to agree with the Masoretic and say, Yah will carry out your king, then in a way he's kind of conceding that he's not their king, but he really is their king. So he's just setting it straight, setting the record straight for them. Verse 37, parable versus proverb, which is a short story versus a short sentence. A short sentence of usually wisdom. A tale versus a byword, which is a synonym for a proverb. Carry you away versus lead you. So this is a punishment. It is not the promised land. It's not leading them to the promised land in this specific verse here. Verse 39, significant difference. Neither shall you delight yourself with it. Versus nor gather. Okay, verse 40, an omission of anoint you. The word you, and as it relates to anoint, utterly has been omission. I should say utterly has been, I believe, omitted as well, as it relates to the word cast, and the supply is completely used up. So utterly is what that means. Used up. 41. Significant difference, and they shall not be yours, versus you shall not enjoy them. 42. Let me just clarify 41 a little bit. So they will not be in existence, versus 41 in the Masoretic. They will exist, but you just want to enjoy them. So one is a lot worse than the other. Verse 42, blight versus locust. Verse 43, the stranger that is within you shall get up very high, and you shall come down very low, which possibly describes the rise of the foreigners in Israel, and possibly even Western nations in the land of Israel. And I wrote down different ethnicities. Perhaps that's what it is, but that's a speculation on my part. An addition of get up above you. This is implied, though. Verse 44. This is just my personal opinion. I could be wrong about this. Could be related to this relationship between this country and perhaps these two countries. It's hard to say, though. Or it could be again, the nation of the Antichrist? It's hard to say. But that's speculation. Again, you can speculate if you like. You can comment again on the comment section below. Who do you think that is? In verse 44, who's it talking about? Verse 45. Significant difference: until he shall have consumed you, and until he shall have destroyed you, versus and overtake you till you be destroyed. Well, it seems the end result seems to be the same here, but I wrote here in brackets, Yah is ultimately the one who destroys you, versus the curses are the ones that destroy you. But when you think about where the curses come from, they're actually from Yah, so it's interesting. Whichever way you see it, it's kind of the source of the destruction. Verse 47, big difference here. Gladness and a good heart versus joyfulness and with gladness of heart. So I do say that's a big difference, because one is saying you have a good heart, saying that people can have good hearts, versus gladness of heart, meaning that the heart possibly is not good. People do not have good hearts. So that's why I made that distinction there and wrote it down as big difference as opposed to a significant difference. 49, addition of from far. An omission like the swift flying of an eagle versus as the eagle flies. So the emphasis is on the swiftness versus on the eagle itself. In retrospect, this sounds like the context is more being in ancient times, but it could be futuristic as well, as it relates to the Antichrist's empire and applying to all ages as well. We see elements of these consequences reflected in our modern age, that he will bring upon you a nation from the extremity of the earth, a nation whose voice you shall not understand. So it could apply in both historical and future context. Verse 50, significant difference here, not pity versus show favor. So yeah, that's almost a big difference, you could say. Oh, actually, no, it isn't. Not pity versus not nor show favor. So no mercy is being extended or favor at all. Okay, verse 52, getting closer to the end here. Significant difference, utterly crushed versus besiege. So one is to be defeated and one is to surround. So you're not defeated yet, but you're just on the way to being defeated. Strong walls versus fenced walls. The same verse, afflict versus besiege. An addition of throughout all your land. 53, omission, your sons and of your daughters. The word all has been omitted, that he has given you in your straightness and your affliction. Those two thoughts. Verse 54, and the children that are left, which may have been left to him, versus the remnant of his children which he shall leave. So one is the will of Yah, the will of Elohim, versus perhaps it's man's will, and that seems to be my opinion there. Verse 57, an addition of the siege. Verse 58, we have a significant difference of wonderful versus fearful. But in any case, the Old English is very close to amazing or wonderful. We also see wonderful versus long continuance. Evil versus sore wickedness. Abiding diseases. Oh, this is 59. Okay. We have a significant difference in 59. Omission of magnify versus wonderful. And then we can see evil versus sore sicknesses. Abiding diseases versus long continuance. So it's a little more specific as to what is a continuance. It could be continuance of many different things. Verse 60, evil pain versus all the diseases, which sounds redundant since it was mentioned in the previous verse. Whereas 60 in the Septuagint is talking about the pain, like this is the focus there. 61, omission of and every plague that is not written, and every one that is written in the book of this law, in 61. 63, on omission of, and you shall be quickly removed from the land, is the context there. Versus the addition of, and to bring you to nothing, and you shall be plucked off the land. 65, shall give you there another and a misgiving. Doubtful, suspicious, that's what that means, heart, and a wasting soul, versus a trembling, fearful heart, and sorrow of mind. 67, significant difference. Would it were evening, versus would God, times 2. So we see that would God times 2. Whereas the Septuagint just says, what would it were morning. So they're not saying by the will of God. It's just saying would it. Sounds like that's what they would prefer, if it only were evening. In the evening you should say if it only were morning. 68, the last verse we're looking at for this video. They shall be sold for free. Where's that? They will be sold for free. This has not happened yet. Okay, let's just read this verse. And Yah shall bring you back to Mizraim in ships, by the way of which I said, you shall not see it again, and you shall be sold there to your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and none shall buy you. So how can this be? They will be sold for free, because they were already in Israel, I should say in Egypt, in ancient times, as slaves. So how can they come back there and become slaves again, unless it happens again in reality? So it seems to be that they will be taken into captivity, the nation of Israel, and they will not be bought. No one will pay money for their ownership or to take them as property, so to speak. They're going to just be sold for free, and I believe this has not happened yet. And if you have seen this or observed this, please comment, where did you observe this? Because I haven't seen any historical basis or any account of Israel being sold for free again. Yes, some of them were tricked. Some accounts say they were tricked into slavery, but to be slaves again a second time, that has not happened yet. So that's all I have for this video of Deuteronomy 28. Thank you very much for your time. And I just want to keep up the momentum moving forward. It's been quite a while since I've posted content here, so just thank you very much for your support. I've been looking at some of the views and some of the videos that have received good viewership and good ratings, I guess you could say. So thank you very much for that. This is a ministry that is completely free. We don't ask for money. It's not even about the money. It's just about revealing the truth of the Bible, and that's how we can see that this trend is it is picking up. I've noticed ever since the advent of the internet, and that seems to be a topic that is becoming more prominent on people's minds. As we see the world events just getting more and more unstable and unpredictable. So I hope that this video has been helpful to you, and I'm motivated and want to continue to finish this the first 5 books of Moses. We're right at the end, coming up very soon, and continuing on with Joshua after that, and until the end of the Tanakh, which is, I believe, ends with the minor prophets in Malachi, if I'm not mistaken. So thank you very much again for your time. Shalom and Maranatha. Till next time, may Allah bless you. This is the Septuagint versus the Masoretic.